WarsawJS.
Hello, and welcome to WarsawJS Meetup number 79. I'm really excited to be the host today. So prepare for a 3-minute presentation. What is this meetup about? And then we'll start our lineup. So first of all, today is the 10th of March. So we have a Super Mario. Have a Super Mario, everyone. WarsawJS Meetup organizing team consists of Piotr Ziętara, Ania Dławichowska, Maciej Machniewski, Luisa Buta, Mirek Stasiak, Łukasz Basaj, and a lot of other people who are in our community. And great gratitude for them. Great applause. Another meetup which is prepared thanks to their effort. Why is WarsawJS? WarsawJS exists to support both professional and novice software developers within the IT community. We intend to accelerate the process of education by sharing our knowledge and experience on multiple levels and multiple relationships between speakers, trainers, new members, people who are looking for a job in IT, people who already are for a long time here, and therefore we create this environment to have networking sessions with all of you. So we have a mission statement which tells about that, and we also comply to the Berlin Code of Conduct, which is a great code of conduct that everyone can contribute to. And the general idea is that our intention is to be gentle and respectful to everyone. That's the intention with which we come to our meetup and our networking sessions, and all our questions should respect the diversity of our audience and everyone that participates in the meetup. We already are over 5,680 people at meetup.com. Go to meetup.com/WarsawJS, where you can subscribe to our events. We provide multiple kinds of events, not only this kind of meetup. Also, we do workshops once a month in which we exercise in different technologies. Great thanks to our sponsors, so 10Clouds, Fresha, PackHelp, PostClick, Prisma, Sumo Logic, and Xfang. All of them help us to stay there during the pandemics. Soon we are going to move to our meetup to the hybrid version, where some of you can join online and some of you can join on site. However, it's still not the time because of COVID. So when it ends up, we will be back. Hello guys, I can see your comments here, and thanks for being responsive here. All right, so we also provide a WarsawJS contest for today. We have licenses for you. I posted the link to our slides to our chat at YouTube and on Facebook, so you can enter the link and go get the invitation here to Discord. And on Discord, we will start the networking session, and we will hand out some licenses for this awesome JetBrains products. Okay, so what else? The networking session, as I mentioned, will start at 8 after the last talk, the fourth talk today, and it's going to be around 8 o'clock. And the workshops, trainers for the next workshop on next Sunday, actually not the Sunday that's going to be now, but the next one, so on 21st March, we are going to have it on Vue.js, and every level is there. So the basic level with Kuba, the intermediate level with Philip, and advanced level with Jakub. All of the groups are still not full, so you can subscribe for them. These workshops are affordable and are non-profit. However, we charge a small, some small amount of money, like 15 euros, so that we make sure that everyone who subscribes is going to come. The speakers for today. So the most important and exciting part for today is that we have, as first, Manjula Dube, who's going to present Web for Everyone Accessibility with React. Amit Sheen, Mapping Mouse Position with CSS. Damian, Dulisz, Intro to Composition API, and Ryan Chenkie, TypeScript Beyond the Basics. So this is the lineup for today. I'm very excited. So let's start and let's invite Manjula as the first speaker. Manjula, are you with us? Oh.
Yes. Hi everyone.
Hello. Nice to meet you, Manjula. I'm happy to be your host, especially that that's actually we've hosted a person from India already. However, it's the first time I host an organizer of React India, so I'm really happy to have you here with us, and I'm very excited about the subject of accessibility.
Happy to be here.
Okay, so now the 22 minutes are for you. Later we come up with some questions. You also can have questions on the chat. So it's your decision if you want to respond or not. We can display them. However, there will be some questions after your talk and later at the networking session.
Sure.
Okay, so have a good luck, Manjula. See you soon.
Yeah, is my screen visible to everyone? I hope yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, cool. So yeah, hi everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about building a web app for everyone, but with React. So more importantly, we forget about the aspect of accessibility in general, and I'll be covering that today. A bit about my introduction. I work as a front-end engineer at Vanguard. I'm a Google developer expert in web and also an organizer at React India. So, and if you want to find me on Twitter, you can definitely go to Manjula_Dube, and that's where I tweet about React and accessibility mostly. So a bit about my company. Vanguard is the only large asset management company that is wholly owned by its investors and has no owners and shareholders. So this client-owned structure basically helps us to focus on the best outcomes for our clients. So one thing that we really make sure at Vanguard is, is this good for our client? We are now growing also in Europe and Australia and Asia. Although we are like a financial company, our focus is more on the technology side. Also, we value a lot accessibility. That means a very good example of that is we are around 7,000 people in tech. So that gives you already the whole number. So we've 19 global offices. We're about 17.6 crew worldwide. And yes, if you're looking for a job, definitely visit our website. We are currently hiring from both technology and management side. And when I talk about accessibility, what we value at Vanguard is all users have equal access to information and functionality regardless of their ability, which we strictly follow at Vanguard. We also make sure that we work to ensure that all our investors can access our products and services to help them reach their financial goals. So today, what I'll be covering is what is accessibility. I'll be going through some common practices. Basically, how would you handle forms in general when you're dealing with React? Also, a bit about error handling and using images and icons. How would you use it? Animations, or something about area attributes, and how would you test that if your website or web app is accessible or not. Firstly, I would like to start with this saying that accessibility is not a barrier to innovation. In fact, it brings us an innovation because you're kind of building and including everyone, and everyone all around the world is kind of using your product. So it's not a barrier. In fact, it's an innovation. And when I talk about working with React, it's not a rocket science, because under the hood you're still writing HTML, even though you term it as JSX, but you're still writing HTML. Why should you really care about accessibility is the first question, right? We all think. In this world, I say, it's not only your friends or you using your, web or internet. It's your grandparents, it's public authorities, sometime monitoring your website. It could be people with, diverse background. For example, they might be people with visual or, auditory, motor, or cognitive disabilities. And, you have to serve all of them. You have to make things possible and build for everyone. So if I have to give a stats, this is how the stats looks like. 1 in every 10 users will have some kind of disability. And this might also be a situational. So, it is just not somebody who has been disabled right from birth. It can also be a situational because you might just break your arm. So, yes, I mean, accessibility even covers that part. And if you don't follow it, you're inviting somebody to just sue you. For example, you already know a story in US, for example, a man who was disabled, who could not use Domino's website. He had filed a case in the court and he actually won, which means, legal and authorities are always monitoring you. If you're not working towards it, start today. And to give you a bit of a report, so Web Accessibility in Mind 2020 did a very, random research, and they took like top few websites and they monitored and they really did the audit, and they found that 98.1% of all the top websites homepages have WCAG failures, which is a quite a big number. And most of the websites, top websites, so to say, failed all of the minor issues. For example, no contrast, empty links, empty buttons, missing alternate text for your images. So these were the things that, that basically this company found out. And it was an amazing report actually. But to be honest, when you think of accessibility, it really does it really is not a very good report. So a bit about WCAG. It is a set of guidelines and techniques published by the working group at Web Accessibility Initiative of Worldwide Web Consortium, which is also called W3C. And currently, WCAG 2.1 is what we have. There is in future, there's WCAG 3.0, which is also known as a silver project, which is still a draft catering to improve the accessibility of the products and the variety of platforms, including disability needs. Also, when the draft will be released, it will cover emerging technologies such as how would you make accessible, in the areas of WebXR, augmented reality, and voice input. And if I talk about, compliance levels, so under this WCAG guidelines, there are different compliance levels, which means A, AA, AAA. Each level includes guidelines that must be met in order to consider that your website is accessible or not. And these levels are built on 3 principles, which means here it says you must do all of the things that falls under compliance level A. This means you should be doing it, and this is like you could have done that in order to achieve the conformance level AAA. So if your website wants to be accessibly compliant, at least you should be level A compliant. A bit about the history of how we got all of these into picture. So there's already ADA, which is like Americans with Disability Act, passed in 1990, which is like a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against any individual, and it could be related to information technology, and they make sure that all of these informations are accessible by all the people using it. And same goes with Section 508. It is a part of Rehabilitation Act and ensures that all the federal agency information is accessible to everyone. Doesn't matter. It includes basically everything, from electronics to your IT and everything. And European Accessibility Act is in Europe, which means it caters to see that your website is basically accessible or not. So when I started off, thinking about accessibility, I totally had a very different perception. I just thought that it's about blind people and that's it. But that was not the case. I mean, it's far beyond that. So if we see about the principles, it means that everything that we build follow these four principles, which means it should be perceivable, it should be operable, it should be understandable, and it should be robust, which means any content that you put on the website should be perceived by everyone, should be operatable, even on keyboards, any device that you use, and should be understandable by everyone, which means building for everyone, right? No matter what framework we use, doesn't really matter. It should be accessible. Actually, the React docs, when you open it, the first line itself says that, React fully supports building accessible websites, often by using standard HTML techniques. So it's not that if you're using some kind of framework or, library, it prohibits you shipping accessible products. In fact, because under the hood, you're still writing HTML. So nothing can prevent us. There are many ways to browse web, and if you say so, accessibility is already built in browsers, which means web is already accessible to you, although it's your job now to make it more accessible, right? And all of us started as a front-end developer learning HTML. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's just writing it more semantically correct. So write semantic HTML from the start. Start following it right from your start while you're building it. And a very nice thing that you already have to do it is, you could just go to w3.org and you will find all the techniques and all the compliance levels that you could see in your website and apply to those to improve it. So it's not rocket science. Some general tips, I often start with, if you could provide a keyboard shortcut, it really helps not only the users who are disabled, or it might just help out normal users also to save their time. So it's always a good idea to have keyboard shortcuts. I also start with color contrast because, before we move on to some math, we need to know that what contrast ratio, what it is basically. So if you see here on the left-hand side, it says good contrast ratio, and on the right-hand side, basically it says bad contrast ratio, which means the dev tools actually gives us a way to check that if it is following AA compliance or not. If you see on the left-hand side, you have like a AA compliance, which is says green tick, but on the right-hand side, it says, you need to, it doesn't comply really because the contrast ratio is 1.87. You need to work more on it to make it, to make the contrast ratio better. So to achieve an ideal AA conformance level, the contrast ratio for most of the body text should be 4.5:1. And for any larger text, it should be 3:1, which means now you see this is an example which I added to my slide. When you add the first color, it says, no, it's not compliant. Now when you add it, it says, yes, you were AA compliant for the large text, which means, it is above 3, which is okay. So you always have these tools to check. So even though your designer is giving some brand colors, as a developer, you could also just go and check whether your brand colors or primary or secondary colors are accessible enough. So the website which I used before was contrastratio.com. So definitely check it out. I also say, start with using battle tested libraries already, because, it doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel. And already, if you're working with React, a lot of things already are there in the community because they are building it. So why not use them? For example, if I talk about date picker or if I talk about modals, so just go and use them. One thing I also say that, you know do not style the text to give it a visual appearance of headings, which, often, you might be doing it, but yes, stop doing that. Here in the code, if you see, I've applied like a p tag and given a font weight and font size to make it look like heading, which is really not the heading, because when you start with headings on your page, and the screen readers are going through navigating through your page, headings are basically a way for them to understand, okay, what's there on the page which is more important, what's like the heading level 2, what's like the heading level 3. So for them, for the users who are screen readers, they are more, perceiving the information from these edge tags, native elements that you use. And if you're kind of using a paragraph and just giving it a visual appearance, it doesn't really make sense, because for them it is not at all perceivable. Have the light mode and the dark mode, which is a very good idea, actually. I mean, there are often times where I don't really like being to work on the dark mode. For example, when I use Visual Studio Code, I prefer light mode. So all of us have a different preference. So always better to have, these modes. Also, talking about skip links, you must have read about it. So, when the keyboard only users interact with your website, they use a tab key to navigate between the links, which means, they would not, uh, as a visual user, they would not use the mouse. They will use the keyboard navigation. And if you have too many links on your header or a menu, they must have to tap through all the links, if because they are the keyboard only users. And it might get annoying sometimes for the keyboard only users to go through all the links and then go to the main content. So providing a skip link basically gives you that way that you allow the user to directly go to the main content and bypass all other things very easily. So this is how you would do it. For example, I have like a skip link here as a component. I see, okay, these are my links and what are the lengths. And I basically map through, and each of the link item is just like a, which is like, a link to something. So now this is like a component, but how would this component work? You would always keep it, off screen, because this will only be seen to the keyboard users while they are tabbing. So the first thing when you tab, and the screen readers will come through is this thing. So when you land on a website, you say tab. This is the first thing that should be, tabbed through and should be navigable. So I'll show you a very quick example at Vanguard. So if you see on the left corner, there is a way, if you press tab, you directly reach to, this part of the content, which means now, okay, this is the main content on this page. So while screen readers are, reading your page, you already know, okay, this is the main content. Always have like a descriptive name for your alt text, which is another WCAG success criteria, and it falls under level A. So that I have a beautiful image here, like two men with a flag. Yeah, I mean, I could give a description alt tag saying two men holding a flag, but it makes more sense to make it more descriptive, because when the screen readers are navigating, for them visually, nothing is at all visible. So providing them more information is only the way you could serve them more accurately. Having more unique like having a unique titles on all your pages. So I mean, we already have React Helmet in React, so definitely use it. And unique titles are the way that screen readers at least have the context of what page they are on while they are navigating from one page to another. So always provide it. Start using fragments instead of div. I mean, just using a div. I mean, we all started with this, like previous versions. Since you cannot return two adjacent element, two adjacent children from your render method, and that's how we used to wrap it around div. But that's not a good idea. Wrap it with fragment, because fragment is not like another element in your DOM. It just wraps things. But when you say, when you wrap things with div, it is like one more element. And if it doesn't make sense to have that extra element in your DOM, it might confuse, screen reader users. Again, I say handling forms. How would in forms, there are three main aspects to be really looking, you should look into. For example, required fields, errors, and we'll go through all of them. Sorry. So first, let's go through input component. And let's say, you're filling up this form, you tried logging in, and it says, okay, you forgot your username. This thing is natively handled. There's no rocket science to it. How would I build my input component? Let's quickly check that. So this is like an input component. I'm passing all of the things that is required by an input component. For example, ID, type, label, placeholder, and I say required equal to 2. Now, how would my input component look like? So my input component would look something like this, which means, in the render method, you see, what you're rendering is your label and your input component. So input and label are always tied together. Make sure, yes, even if your label is sort of blank, it's fine. You can just keep it blank, but always tie it with your label and input component. And now here, what you see I've done in this component is I'm checking that if I've passed a required as a prop. If yes, just add an input props required to it, and then I'm just trying to spread it here in my component, which means my component is already taking care of required fields if I pass required as a prop in my input component. One thing to note is there might be a case where you still might not have an HTML5 support. So it's a good way to always include area required explicitly, because when you pass required here and you kind of spread here the required attribute, yes, for sure, it is also taking care for screen readers. But if there's no HTML5 support, you need to explicitly specify area required. Only then the screen readers would know that that field is a required field. Also, dealing with multiple required fields. When you're dealing with multiple required fields, make sure that you kind of provide some things at the top stating that, okay, these are the required fields. This really helps the screen reader users. Provide more instructions wherever necessary, because it's all about text when they are navigating through screen readers, right? More information you provide, the more they perceive. So when you have a required field with a specific format, for example, let's take a date field. And now, how would my input component look like? I would say, okay, input required true, label is date, type is date, and this is the value. Good. How would I give more information about, something is, this is the format and this is how it should be? How would you do that? You would do that by area labeled by. which means in the input, you're passing this area attribute, and you say area labeled by instruct, which means instruct here is your ID, which is like a span. So it can take multiple IDs. You can pass multiple IDs to area labeled by, and that's how it works. So now when the screen reader will go through this input field, they will read date must be TTMMYY format. So it gives them already a clue of what this format should look like. You can pass, as I said, it accepts multiple IDs already, so you could just go on and provide the necessary information. Good. So what is area labeled by intended to do? It is intended to identify the element that labels the current element, right? And what we did here is we did not override or overrided the label, but basically provided more information about the label. So in this case, doing it via area described by would be more appropriate rather than doing it with area labeled by. Area described by works in the same way. You basically give it an ID, and then when the screen reader will go through your input field, it would read that date must be MMDDYY format or whatever format it is. You provide it, and this is how the screen readers gets that information. So here doing it via area described by is more appropriate than doing it via area labeled by. And what is the basic difference between them? As you saw, area labeled by specifies and overrides the label. When you want to do that, use area labeled by. But when you want to provide more information about the current element, use area described by. How would you handle errors? So area described by actually works with it very well. You could see that have your input component always, tied to your error, because while submitting a form, for example, you should know that error belongs to which field. Here, two important things to note. I've used area described by and then given it an ID, which is email errors. So which means anything that will be now happening as an error will be associated to this field. And I'll also show you how the error component looks like. I've also passed an area invalid because you should know that what is happening. Until there is an error, this field will be invalid, right? So you should also provide an area invalid to your component. Now let's see how the error component looks like. We have a div with role alert, which is a good thing to note because role alert kind of gives them a sense to the screen reader users that, okay, there is something that needs attention, which means there's an error and I need to fix it, and only then I can move ahead filling up the form. So definitely good idea. Not good idea. You should have a role alert if you're using div, for example. And that's how the errors will be rendered. Now, as I said before, area invalid should be used in conjunctions with associating the error message field, which means they should be used with area described by. Let's see how we should handle disabled buttons. Do not disable it using a disable attribute. Why? I will tell you before. Let me tell you after this slide because it makes more sense. So let's say you have an action component wherein if you pass a disabled prop to it, you render something like this in your JSX. So you say, okay, if this prop is there, something like this should happen. So a button type submit with disabled attribute. If you do this thing, what happens is disabled button is actually removed from your accessibility tree, which means now if the screen reader is navigating through your page, they don't really have an idea about this disabled button at all, which is not a good idea. So what you should do instead, have a button in your render method. What should happen actually is have a button, have a class, have everything. Instead of disabled, provide area disabled so that the screen readers know that this button is disabled. And provide a CSS, which will be a class definitely to your element. Provide some of the CSS which should make it look like disabled, which means you'll provide a CSS wherein you can't really click it via mouse. For example, cursor not allowed, opacity, you will decrease the opacity. You will also say pointer events none, which means from the mouse you can't really now tab through this button, which is a good thing. Good. But what about the keyboard users? So you should also make sure that you're kind of preventing the click event to happen. So all's good now. So you kind of did it without making and using the disabled attribute, which is a good thing, because otherwise you would not ever make sure that your screen readers know about this button. And now, are we done? No. So as soon as you are sure that now this button needs to be enabled, you can set the area disabled to false. Remove all the classes that you applied to the disabled class to make it look enabled now, and allow the submit button to trigger the submit, which you could do it via JavaScript. So that's it. That was very simple. Now, let's say, we always made sure that in our action component, we made sure that, okay, have the allowed disabled attribute. If you pass this as a prop, you would disable the button, but don't use it until and unless you want to make sure that this button should also not be shown by, or even accessed by the screen readers. Only then use it. But I don't think there is any use case. And now, how do you deal with focus indicators, right? They're the best part actually of accessibility. Let's say, I've just written a button and a link. There's a button and a link, and it's a default native HTML. How would the focus indicators look like in default in various browsers? For example, on the right hand side you see it's Firefox, on the left hand side you see it's Chrome. The behavior varies. So the default focus indicators behavior varies, and none of the designers will really like it. And they'll come to you, they'll say, okay, this is how it should look like. And you'll be like, okay, let's do it. And you'll be like, removing the outline would help, and some box shadow. But do not remove them unless you've alternative. And even if you have an alternative, make sure that the outline that you give is not none, but instead 3px or whatever you want to keep it, make it transparent, but do not remove it. Because sometimes when you use box shadow in the dark contrast mode, box shadow doesn't really work well. So in that case, you need to make sure that you're not removing the outline altogether. Instead, making sure that you provide it a transparent with a solid and 3px. So good, handled focus. Good. Now the next thing is, how would you programmatically manage focus? Since you're working with React, which is a single page app, which means you might have to go from one route to another. Even if it's a single page app, you definitely have to go, which means your link component or the route that you're using need to be aware of where the keyboard focus should be once you land on that page, right? And this is really important because, once you move from one page to another, it's really important that you have the keyboard focus placed on the main section of that page, because it really will be helpful for the screen reader users. How would you do that? Quickly in the component where wherever on the page you are, on that page you'll make sure that the focus is on that page, and this could happen just writing in your use effect. So always make sure that on any page you sort of provide a focus by default when you load that page to main section of your page. This could be heading, this could be some main section that you're trying to show on that page. So very important. So take charge of your focus. If you really want to test your website, if it's keyboard navigable or not, just open it, start pressing tab, and you should be able to move forward to all the interactive elements that are on your page. And basically, shift plus tab should move you backwards, and you should be you should be able to navigable everywhere on all of the interactive elements. Saying something about handling dialogues, there's already a sort of lot of models already in the React community that are accessible. One of them is area model, React area model. One is Reach UI dialogue model, which we use at Vanguard. One is React LI dialogue. So yeah, I mean, sort of just use them because they're already there. Now, something about DOM and visual order. I mean, all of us love Flexbox. You know, it makes things easier for us as a developer. But be careful when doing it, as it desynchronizes the DOM from the visual order, which might sometimes be confusing for your keyboard only users, because you might just ruin the DOM and the visual order. So be careful. Even when you're using it, just be careful. Also, something related to performance, right? All of us love performance, and something you would want to improve on the website as a performance is really a good thing. So there's a new thing which recently came, and there's this content visibility auto. And this enables the user agent to skip an element's rendering work, which means the layout and the painting would be, skipped off until it is needed, which means a large portion of your content is off screen, leveraging the content visibility property. So this will help you that your page load is much faster. Yes, it is a good idea, but sometimes on the sections of content, you might include headings or any section that shouldn't be in this content visibility auto. And that is why I recommend keeping the headings and the landmarks elements outside of the regions styled with content visibility auto. Okay, I'm running out of time, so I'll quickly go through. So this is one of the articles by Marcy Sutton. You should really read it. Hiding content, don't do it. Just don't do it. Instead, what you should do is have some sort of CSS which might throw your element off the screen and still be accessible to the screen readers. Self-explanatory CTAs. I mean, make sure wherever possible the visual layer doesn't need to be that self-explanatory. So here, if you see a views and action button, but the visual hidden button is only visually hidden, but it is making sure that screen readers could access this. Good. This is a quick thing on the icon component. I'm going really fast because I'm out of time. So this is an icon component, and I've passed an icon to it and a label here. And you could see how I've made sure that icon component is rendered. So if you have a label, you basically return that SVG, because this is an icon with the focusable false and area hidden. But if you have a label, what you do is you also write a span with it and with the visual hidden and the prop to it. So this means that this label would be visually hidden, which will only be accessed by the screen readers. I will now jump to a part where I should be going because I'm really running out of time. So yes, creating accessible animations. This is one of the good things because I'm a big fan of animations, but when used properly, I believe they add a ton of value to the user experience. That said, you should be mindful of the fact that not everybody experiences the same. Some folks might trigger physical symptoms like nausea, dizziness, and you would not want to give that symptom to anyone. So already in the OS, there is a check mark that you could tick, and all your animations would be, stopped. There's a media query that you could use. For example, preferred reduced motion. In this section, you saw that how we are kind of handling this. So definitely use it. I mean, maybe have a toggle in your web app to set off all of the animations. There's a quick talk by Inclusive Motion Talk by Wellhat. You should really watch this. Some quick development and testing tools, some linting tools we'll discuss. There's JSX LI, which you could use, which statically checks the accessibility mistakes while you're writing your code. There's ReactX, which you could use, which pops out all the errors on the console that you should go back and fix. There's Spelly, which is also an automated accessibility testing pal, which is like an internal audit. You could use it on your command line. Some sanity checks you should do have light mode, dark mode, check if button, label, content is descriptive, have a mechanism to pause the background video, have contrast color always sufficient. Make sure you're compliant with WCAG 2.1, because this is like a sort of standard thing now across all of the companies that they're trying to reach. So make sure you're compliant. So we at Vanguard support all of the ways that we could test it manually. For example, using JAWS, VoiceOver, keyboard. We also support for low vision. So definitely do that. There's something in Chrome which recently came up. You can actually simulate the vision and see, how your website looks like. So, which is a good thing. Make use of the dev tools. Get skilled, test, and build accessible apps. Last thing, I also wrote a book. So if you really want to have an immense knowledge of whatever I said, or more about accessibility, go and buy. Definitely. And yes, subscribe to my newsletters if you want to, if you like to read about accessibility or React. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manjula. Very informative and excellent presentation. Can I share the slides with the community now?
Yeah.
Okay, because I just wrote the link, and everyone can actually now see the links which you provided, because I think they are very, very precious.
I think I had to skip some of the slides.
Yeah, I don't understand. Only 22 minutes, actually we crossed that barrier a lot. So there will be only one question which I promised to ask. What if we are getting images from some external API which is not delivering any alt text to it? Have you ever tried how to handle this kind of issue?
Yeah, I mean, even if you're receiving the images from external API, it would still be a link, right? It would still be a link to the image. You would still render it on your side using image tag source equal to the link, right? So there is a possibility to provide an alt text.
Yeah, well, I understood that Jeju thinks that there is one link with multiple links, let's say, concerning mountains, and there's one mountain and another mountain coming from the same link. So still, we don't know. Maybe there is an artificial intelligence tool which will describe what's actually on the picture. But yeah, if they don't give you the alt, I think there is no way how you can show or fill in this attribute.
If they don't give you the alt link, tell them to give it.
Yeah, tell them, because we are developers, we also have power, and we can use these tools which provide better accessibility. Awesome. So thank you very much, Manjula. Can you stay with us during the networking session? It will be after 8:30 CET. Do you think it's possible for you to join our Discord?
I don't think, because I have another talk today.
Yeah, I understand. You're very busy today. Yeah, so you're also on a different conference, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I
So
mean, but I would be happy if somebody has any questions regarding the talk or regarding accessibility in general. Please reach out to me later as well on Twitter. I'm very active. I'll answer you, I promise.
okay, thank you very much, Manjula. So thanks a lot, and let me invite the next speaker. So Amit Sheen, pointing the CSS position, well, the mouse position with CSS. Hello, Amit.
Hello, hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. I'm happy you're here with us. You're currently in Israel, quite near to Tel Aviv, like 20 kilometers, as you said. What's the situation now? Is it still sunny there now, or
Is
it's
it what?
is there sun yet? No, it's not no sun, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's actually the weather is really nice. So the sun is out, and the situation is starting to get back to normal.
Awesome.
Uh, yeah,
I'm
so
very happy to be your host today. So I will leave you now for 22 minutes, and yeah, and if there will be some questions, I can display. It depends on you if you want to see them. And
okay.
okay, so good luck, and yeah, 22
Thank
minutes
you,
for you. See you
thank
soon.
you. So, hi again, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Yeah, my name is Amit, and today we're going to see how to use the user's mouse position to manipulate and control our CSS with CSS. Yes, you can do it with JavaScript. What we're going to see today is a pure CSS alternative, just because it's a nice trick and something that might be useful in the future. So just before we begin, I'm going to do a quick introduction. As I said, my name is Amit Sheen. I'm a web developer. Been writing code since forever. I'm doing it professionally most of my adult life, mainly front end, a lot of CSS. I really like to push the limits of CSS, and I love learning new things. So if you've got anything interesting, everything front end related, talk to me on Twitter or something. So let's begin. I'm actually going to start with some examples, just so you can see it in action. Um, so when I'm talking about mapping, I'm talking about using the user's mouse position. Um, mouse position to set our CSS property. Here, for example, I've created this trail of dots following the cursor. The animation is obviously with CSS, and I'm actually mapping here the mouse position to set the top and left properties of the dot. You can control any property you like. Here, for example, I'm mapping the mouse position to the transform rotate X and rotate Y. And you can also set the colors, the color sizes, positions, anything you want. This is an example of a nice parallax effect using background position. I'm setting the background position, and this is just an example to demonstrate that you can even control the content of an element just by mapping the mouse position. Again, everything is with pure CSS. So how does it work? In a second, we're going to do some live coding. We're going to do it live, and here's what we're going to do. So first, we're going to build a grid on the screen, and then we're going to use the Hoover pseudo class. So every time the users hover over a cell, we're going to set two variables. So for example, when I'm hovering this cell, the x is equals 1 because it's one cell over, and y equals 2. If I'm going to hover the cell next to it, x is going to be equals 2. If I'm hover the cell beneath it, then y equals 3, and so on. And then the last thing that we're going to do is to use these variables to set our CSS property. It could be, again, any property that we want. So let's do some live coding. Again, let's go to our browser. And we're going to use this cube. I'm not going to talk about the cube itself. If you're interested, I wrote a whole full article about CSS perspective. This is the article right here, how CSS perspective works, with lots of example and a step-by-step guide to building this cube with animations and everything you need. So I'm not going to talk about the cube itself, but let's have a quick look on our markup. We have a wrapper div with the class of content, and we have the cube itself with 6 sides. And let's take a look at the CSS. The CSS has nothing special yet, just the body, the content, and the cube. And we can see that the cube has an animation right now, obviously, but we're going to stop this animation. I'm going to comment it out. Yep, because we want to control the cube's rotation with the mouse movement. And we'll do it by mapping the mouse position to the cube's rotate X and rotate Y. And actually, let's add here at the content to custom property. Let's add position X and position Y. These will be our variables to set. So let's begin. And we've said that the first step will be to build a grid. Now we're going to do a simple 10 by 10 grid, but you can do the grid in any size you want. The more cells you have, the more accurate the mapping will be. But a lot of cells can also lead to performance issues. So adjust the grid size according to your specific needs. But again, for now we'll use a simple 10 by 10 grid, which means I need to add 100 cells to my markup. And I have to add these cells before the content, like here. And why? Because of the cascade. The way the cascade works, the way CSS works, we want to use this cell to control this content. And you can only control, each element can only control its descendants or their following siblings, meaning siblings that comes after the element. So the cells must come before this content, and I can't actually put the cells inside their own div. So the cells have to be before the content. So let's add cell times 100. That's 100 cells. Press tab, and here we have 100 cells just before the content. Let's go to our CSS and add a cell class. We'll give them a width of 10% and the height. And just so we can see them, let's give them a border of 1 pixel solid white. Okay. It's supposed to be. Yeah, so here, yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be. So this is our cells, but obviously that's not the way they're supposed to be. We want them to be in a grid, and there's a few ways that we can position these cells. We can use position absolute and use top left or transition, but the easiest option by far is just to use a display grid. So let's get back to our body and give our body a display of grid. And because we want the grid to be a 10 by 10, we'll give it a grid template, right? Of repeat, yeah. This is 10 by 10. Okay, now these cells have to be 100%. And just for visualization purposes, we're gonna add this hover effect. So let's add a background of, I don't know, green. So here we have a full size grid, 10 by 10, and when I hover over the cells, they turn green. So the second step is to map these cells, each cell, to a custom property, to this custom property that we set earlier. So we need to target each cell, and that's not a problem. We can target a cell by using the nth child selector. For example, let's take this cell, for example. I know that this is cell number 13, because this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So this cell is number 13. So if I want to target him, I can come right over here and select cell, nth child, 13. And then right here inside, I can set these two custom property. The x here is equals to 2, and y equals to 1. Okay, so but it's okay. But there's actually two things. I actually only want to set these values when the user hovers over the cell. So we're going to give this cell also the hover pseudo class. And the second thing is we don't want to set the custom properties of the cell itself. We want to set these values to its sibling, to the content div. So we're going to actually add a sibling combinator. This sign over here this is the sibling combinator, and select the content. So now actually it works. So when I hover over this specific cell, the custom property changes to these values. This custom property changes to these values. And we'll see it in action in 2 minutes. Right now we don't see anything changes. But first I need to do this part 100 times for 100 cells, right? Now I can theoretically copy this 100 times and change excuse me, and change the values each time, but I'm obviously not going to do it. There are a few ways to make things simpler, like you can target a whole row or a whole column, for example, and that makes things easier instead of targeting just one cell at a time. And I actually wrote about this method, about the column method in my article, but for now, because we don't have a lot of time, so we're just going to use a simple and fast for loop. Okay, so I'm going to use for. Let's take a variable, and we're going to use it 100 times. So from 0 to 100. Okay, and this is the cell. And let's just do a very simple math here. This needs to be the I one. And so I select each cell every time that I loop. And the X position needs to be $I, the remaining of 10. And this needs to be floor, of yeah, so that's it actually. And now when I hover over the screen, for each cell, the mouse position is mapped into these custom properties. So the last thing that we need to do is to actually use this custom property and to see the change happen live. So let's go to our cube. Okay, we commented out this animation. Let's go to our cube and have a transform, rotate y. Let's start with the y-axis, and we'll do a calc here. So I want the rotation, the initial rotation, to be minus 180 degrees, and I want the final rotation, to be plus 100 degrees. So that's minus 100 degrees plus 20 degrees for each step. So I'm actually going to write it here, calc. Okay. I said minus 180 degrees plus 20 degrees times each step for the x position. Because the x, when I move on the x-axis, the cube rotates around the y-axis. So this is var position x. Yeah, forgot. Yeah. So yeah, okay. So now when I hover over the screen, when I go from left to right, you can see the cube rotates. Let's get rid of the border for now. Yeah. So when I move the mouse from left to right, you can see the cube moves from left to right. So let's just copy it real quick for the y-axis also. So the rotate x is for the position, of the y. So now we can see that we have a full 360 view of the cube. We're mapping the mouse position and everything, of course, with pure CSS. And that's it. This is how you map and use mouse position with CSS. There is one last example I wanted to show you. I did a longer live session with our local CSS community where I actually took this a step further and built kind of a click and drag effect. So when I hover over this cube, nothing happened. But when I click, I can actually grab it and start dragging it. So when I leave the mouse, the animation gets back, and when I click it, I can drag it. So this is just one more idea of what you can do with it. Yeah, I think I try to make it faster. Yeah, that's it for me. Questions? Peter?
Hello. So I'm back, and congratulations for the great talk. And yeah, super interesting, especially that you showed us also the coding experience and how you use this code pen tool. And thanks a lot for that. So Jejuch asks you, from your experience, what is the maximum grid size that is still effective on most devices?
Well, here's the thing. First of all, this method is mainly for desktops. If you want to, I didn't talk about mobiles. I want to make this lecture a bit shorter. But if you want to use mobile, so you have to use Focus, or you would have to use JavaScript. So if you are talking about desktops, so I think you can go up to several hundreds divs without having too much to worry about, because you're not animating the divs, you're not actually doing anything with them, they're statics. So I have, in my examples, I'm using 20 and 20 grids, so it's 400 cells, and there is no lag. It's pretty smooth.
Okay, so thanks a lot for the answer here. I can see now any questions more. However, it would be great if you joined also our networking session at Discord. It's going to bring us a very similar experience as it was with Clubhouse, but now more inclusive, because anyone can use a desktop application or mobile application for Discord. So I hope you're going to join us at the channel. Actually, I saw you already joined. So let's see there maybe at 8:30. Is it okay for you?
Yeah, I'm going to try to be there.
Okay, great. Then, so see you soon, and let me introduce the next speaker. So, Damian Dulisz, are you with us?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear very well. Hello.
Great, cool. Hello. Thank you for having me. That's a first time after a long while. Don't be scared of this monster there. He's very,
That looks
very nice.
quite sleepy, so I think it's not good.
Yeah, hopefully he's gonna stay that way before the talk ends. Okay, shall we start? Let me.
Yeah, let's check if the slides are displaying.
Yeah, I'm gonna share one of the screens and let's see whether that works.
I hope everyone already knows that Damian is one of the core contributors to Vue.js, so the Vue.js team. So
that's an overstatement, but I try to help at some of the core libraries or docs, and the newsletter. But that's gonna be somewhere in the slides. So
okay, hey, good luck, Damian. See
thanks.
you soon after 22 minutes. Good luck.
Oh gosh, I hope I will make it. So hey, I'm Damian Dulisz. You can find me on GitHub, Twitter, and yeah, that's about it. I'm mostly working on the within the core team on the news.vuejs.org newsletter, which also has a website. And you can tell I'm reusing the slide since I haven't been updating the slide since 2019. And right now we just hit the 191st issue of the newsletter, which is pretty great. I think if you are not a subscriber, but you are using Vue or you're interested in Vue, you might want to go there. So just one more time, that's the address. So I also do some open source work. So yeah, if you use Vue, you might know those libraries. If you have any issues open, well, don't mention that on the in the questions. Because yeah, that's rude. So one of those is Vue Multiselect Validate, which is a validation library which just recently received support for Vue 3 and Vue Global Events in collaboration with Eduardo San Martin Morota, aka Posva. I'm also a big fan of dogs, so as you probably noticed, yeah, somewhere there. So this is Bento, like the box of food. As you can see, he likes to blink, and if he's not sleeping there, he's sleeping under the disk. So yeah, that's him. And because I love dogs, I also work at a company called Chorus Dog, because obviously where I'm a technical lead. So this talk is going to be about composition API, which is one of the major and I think the biggest or most impactful addition to the Vue API. But first, before we go into like what it is, I think we need to cover why we need it, right? So right now, there are a few composition patterns or methods to share some code across different parts of your application, right? So there are mixins, there are higher order components, and scope slots. Higher order components never really picked up in Vue like they did in React. So there's mostly focus on mixins and scope slots. For those of you that haven't been using Vue, and I will not be explaining every details on Vue because, well, I guess you had the time to prepare for that before. So first of all, mixins. They're pretty straightforward in that, and this is the, I think you see my hand. So, and you can see my mouse. Well, that's also okay. So on the right side, you can see that this is the declaration of a component. So it has the data, which is like the local state, the mounted hook, lifecycle hook, the destroyed lifecycle hook, and methods. And all of that is exposed, well, except for the lifecycle hooks, exposed to the template of the component. And a mixin literally follows the same structure as a component. And the way you can use it, you can mix it into an existing component by the syntax at the very bottom, which is like the usage in another component. And it's gonna simply, well, not simply, because there's an like algorithm on how to or strategy how to merge those properties into your existing component. So it's very easy to use. It doesn't really create any additional components. But there are some cons to that, namely namespace clashes, because like if you have an X and I properties in the mixin and you want to have those two on the component, well, the component will override it, but you might already know that it will break the way the mixin will work, right? I mean, you probably shouldn't call those properties X and I to begin with, but yeah, who am I to judge? So the other problem is that once you use mixins, and especially if you use multiple of those, you don't really know where those properties came from unless you do like a search, like, hey, from which mixin is it? So it's not ideal. And it also doesn't really allow you to share templates. So not great. Then we have scoped slots. And when we talk about sharing functionalities, where we don't really care about template in that case, we usually go for renderless components. And yeah, I guess that's also something that is present in React. So by the way, if you're using Vue, you can like, I don't know, raise a hand on the chat. So later on, I will be able to see whether there were actually people that know Vue and like, yeah, I'm not just like producing myself, and people won't really, yeah, it won't be very useful for them. So anyway, scoped slots as renderless components. So the new thing, or maybe not really new thing, but like the uncommon thing for beginners in Vue will be the render method that you can see at the end of the component declaration, which is returning the default scoped slot. And this is very similar to React, where you pass arguments, and then those arguments, as you can see at the very bottom, within the with mouse component, the template with the v slot is kind of like a function where the properties that you expose within the render function, they will be accessible here. So, and yeah, that's pretty good because as in the pattern itself is pretty good because it keeps the logic local. It doesn't leak to anywhere else. So there are no like namespace collisions. The source of the variables or like methods, because you can expose not just the properties like X and Y, but also the update method if you want, are also very clear, because you need to take those within the vslot syntax at the very bottom. And yeah, those could be composed together. So you have like a with mouse here, and you could put like a with keyboard with, I don't know, camera or whatever, nested together. And it's still gonna, like, you can mix those together where you pick some properties from one of those, pass it somewhere else, and so on, without having to worry that, like, yeah, there might be some collisions. So if you want to like rename a property, you just use JavaScript to rename that. But there are some cons, which is like every time you do that, like every time you create a renderless component, you create a component, which involves creating a new component instance, which has some performance costs, right? So, if there are any questions right now, I can't really see at the other screen because I use the whatever helper from Keynote. So, but I will try to get to those a bit later. So, the other con is that you can only access those properties within the template. So if you wanted to use like X and Y somewhere within your script tag of that component that is using this with mouse renderless component, you can't really do that. So that's not great. So this is actually where Composition API comes in, where we take the simplicity of mixins. I hope so. Like, I guess you can grow up to like, grow up, yeah, probably, but at some point. But like, if you grow to using it, like, it becomes quite simple to use. So at first it might not be that, but generally it becomes like second nature later on. So the idea of Composition API, it is kind of similar to React hooks. But there are a few differences, which I will get into later on. So I think you can start thinking about it as like hooks for Vue, but better. But of course, I'm biased, so Of course, I would say it's better. Yeah, obviously. So here, some very, very basic things. Vue now exposes several methods that allow you to replicate the behaviors that you would normally have within a component. So for example, you have the reactive method, which you can use, which is very similar to the data function that you had within a component, which allows you to create some reactive state or reactive object in this case. So here's a basic example where you can see where we want to create a store where we pass reactive, where we call reactive and pass an object. And this object will be transformed into a reactive object using proxies for each of those properties and so on. And the good thing is it can be used outside of a component. So if you really want to create like a store where you want to share that store out between different components, kind of like global state, well, that's literally the code that you need, except maybe you need to export the cons so you can import the store in other components. Then reacting to changes. So the next method is the watch. Watch works very similar to how it works within the old options API or the default options API in Vue. And the function here accepts three arguments. Here we are just going to take a look at the two of them, which first is either ref, which we'll get back a bit in a moment, or a function that should return the fragment of the state that you would like to observe and react to. And then you have the callback that should be called whenever that property has changed. So in this case, we want to watch the counter, and whenever the counter changes, we want to console out, that it has changed, right? So that's pretty straightforward. Then we have reactive primitives, because reactive assumes that you will pass an object and you have to pass the object around, because if you were to pass like this counter property somewhere, you would pass it by value instead of a reference. So to tackle this problem, we introduced something called a ref, which is like a reactive reference, which can be used for any type of data structures, like objects, arrays, but also for primitives. And the benefit of using the ref is that you can, it's going to create like a wrapper object around it, which has this value property, which actually contains the value of the reference. And then if you want to mutate that, because Vue is all about mutations, you just have to do like counter.value and then assign like a new value to it, right? Yeah, and a reference will be a common theme later on. So computer properties. And computer properties underneath are also refs. So if you would like to create a new computed property, it accepts either a function or okay, it works. So it accepts either a function or an object with a get and set methods. And in here, like, we have a counter which starts with 0, and then we need from the function, we need to return the value of the computed. So then whenever the counter value has changed, the computed won't really update right now unless it's being used somewhere. Oh yeah, my headphones just disconnected. So if anyone said something, but probably didn't because it's remote. So yeah, okay. Anyway, next one, we have refs and watchers. So, and let me just validate whether I'm still connected. Oh yeah, I think I am. Good. So a watcher can also, instead of, like I mentioned, instead of a function, it can also accept a ref. So if you want to watch a reference, we just pass the reference. If you want to watch a computer, we just pass the computer there as it is, because it's a ref that can be observed by a watcher. If you want, you can observe multiple references or refs, where you just pass as the first argument to the watch, you pass an array of of references, and then the callback will receive an array of arguments that mimics the properties or the references that you are observing. Okay, so we covered the data part and reacting to data. So the other part is lifecycle hooks. So from Vue, you can also import functions that will execute when a component is when that lifecycle hook executes within a context of a component. And of course, you can't really use those outside of a Vue component. So yeah, be mindful of that. So altogether now, there is a new thing in a Vue component, which is called setup. And it basically replaces almost everything within a Vue component, except for components and props. So here is an example that you, I think seen previously, where we translated the mixin or the sculpt slots example into composition function, or actually not yet composition functions, just into composition API within a component. So here we declare a reactive state for the mouse position. We declare a function where we update that mouse position, set up unmounted and undestroyed lifecycle hooks to add and remove the event listener, and then we return that object, the reactive object, on the component actually. So whatever you return from setup becomes available on the template, right? And the good thing with composition API is that you can just take the code here and just move it into a separate function. And but you might ask, like, hey, but what happens with unmounted or undestroyed? Like this, the context of the component is being inherited, so that shouldn't be a problem. As in, it's not a problem. So later on, if you want to use that that piece of functionality in your component, all you need to do is just import that function, call it, and you can pass any argument that you want, like any refs that you created in setup and so on. And then just return whatever value that you want to expose on the template on the top right here. So, and you can of course use composition functions inside composition functions, and so on, which is very good. So this is where that goes. So very easy to use, no additional component instances, no namespace issues, because you can rename those properties as you want. It's very clear where those variables are coming from, and if you are using composition functions within composition functions, well, you don't really want to leak those, so it doesn't really matter where it originally comes from, right? So yeah, like I said, very high composability. Difference from hooks. Well, Vue components are mostly stateful components, so there is that. The major difference is that the setup function is only being called once, and I guess that's why, because it's a stateful component. So, and because we are operating on reactive data, once it's returned, all the watchers are set and everything keeps updating whenever you modify a property. And because of that, because the setup function is not being called every time the component has to re-renders, there is no issues with the call order, and I think that's something in hooks to look be aware of, where if you were to put a conditional around a hook, it could break some caching. I think something related to use state. I'm not a React expert, so please correct me if if I said something wrong. So demo time, and I don't know how much time I have left because I closed that presentation stuff thing. So
You still have 10 minutes.
Perfect. Cool. Okay, it's really awkward when you can't really like see anyone and don't really know whether you're connected or not. So I have a very basic project, and as you can see, I really like dogs, so it's going to be about dogs. And I'm using something called Vite, which is a very nice development tool. So if you're using Webpack, move to Vite because it's just so fast. So yeah, 700 milliseconds before it started. So I think that's pretty good, although it's a very small project, but it shouldn't matter because the way it works, it's not really dependent on the size of the project. Well, not gonna talk about Vite here. So although it's very fast, like hello WarsawJS, and I know it's like very, I don't know, 2015 to be excited about hot module replacement, but yeah, I'm still am because it's just so like it's instant, and it's instant also because it technically just uses ESM modules and just pigs the file as it is, as in the browser uses it directly. So it's like you were to edit the like you just dragged an HTML file into the browser and edit it directly. So there is no like compilation of like whole bundles and so on, except like in this case, it's a view file. So it's going to be compiled on the fly, whatever the browser asks for it. And I was supposed not to talk about Vite, so here it goes. Anyway, so here we have a component, view component, options API, classic, local state, computed property, or a watch, and some methods. Should be pretty straightforward. It's view tree, so you can, as you can see, I don't really need to wrap the whole thing into a div, which I think is a accessibility benefit, as was already mentioned in the first talk. So yeah, and this is what the application does. It just fetches random dog pictures, which is a good thing to have, right? So yeah, I can type something, and yeah, well, if it fails, then we know it fails. Well, let's just go. I don't. The breed of Bento is not really here, so it was a disappointment. But yeah, was too lazy to prepare another demo. So oh yeah, I was using a composition API as a plugin over a year ago, and I confirm its greatness. Yep, I'm using it for like more than a year, and it's just awesome. But yeah, you will figure that if you try it. So let's extract that into composable, right? So yeah, this is what we have here, and let's translate this component into the. I can probably do something like this. So let's translate that component into a new well, how it would look here. So we do import, and we need a ref. Probably we need a computed. We need what would we need? We need a watch. And yeah, that's probably it. So from view, then we also need the axios from, I should have copied it, but well, whatever. So export default, setup. And what we need is, well, const data. That's ref, no. And as you can see, I always use refs because I think refs are just better than reactive because you don't really have to worry and you just assume everything is a ref. Unless it's not a ref, but yeah, you will know. Pending ref const error ref no. Oh geez. And then also we need the breed. So let's do const breed ref collie. Okay, and we got that. So then we need the computer property. So let's do the URL thing. So let's do computed, and yeah, gonna do something smart and just copy that thing here. And I can't really do this breed because this is not really as in this is not accessible in setup. It doesn't really exist. It's an artificial thing in here in this component, and like the instance doesn't really exist within setup yet, unless you use the get current instance, but that's another thing. So yeah, you don't really have access to that. So, but we have breed as an ref, so we just do breed value. And yeah, so we got our computer property, then we need a watcher. So I'm gonna do URL, and then we need to, I think we also wanted to have it debounce. Do I have use debounce here? Yeah, I use debounce here. So let's do, maybe instead of a watcher, let's start with the fetch method. So it's gonna do function fetch, and then let's do, well, I'm just gonna be smart about this and just copy a fragment because, yeah, why not? You might be asking, why not using preter? Well, because preter is frustrating when it formats it the way I don't really like it. And putting like semicolons at the very end, that's very frustrating. And I know you can turn it off, but well, still frustrating. Okay, so we got the fetch method, and we need to debounce it. And this is like super ugly. Like, why the fuck you? Oh, sorry. Why the hell would you need to do something like this, right? So instead of like, it doesn't really make sense to put it on the data. So let's do const fetch equals, well, just fetch, and yeah, we have our fetch data debounce, or actually debounce fetch here. And now we can do the watcher, right? So let's do watch, and then pass the URL here, and then do the, yeah, I think we just do the debounce fetched here, and we also need to get the immediate part, so we do it here, immediate true. And yeah, then we just return, well, the things that we need. So we need the breed, we need the pending, refresh, error, and dog data. So in that case, we don't really have a refresh, so we do refresh, and then it's gonna do fetch. Jesus, I don't think it should be fetch. That's okay, and then fetch data. We also need data. We also need error, and also need is pending. Okay, so we got that. And if I, oh yeah, that's how it works. So with composable, oh, subtrace, no, Jesus Christ. What just happened? All dog data, yeah. This work. Nope. Oh, the bounce is not, yeah, of course. Yeah, so I haven't set up linting here, so that's why I look very lame doing what I do. Oh yeah, perfect. Error is not. Oh yeah. See, that's the issue with online conferences, because like you don't really get the like people shouting like, "Hey, you're stupid! You made a mistake here," which is never nice, but well, helps, right? Especially if you don't set up your tooling, and you can't really hear people laughing, which is the other issue. So, well, it works. Oh, well, thank you for that. Like, okay, so yeah, I typed something, and that's not a bug, or is it? Oh yeah, that's one. Oh yeah, definitely. Okay, so just calling. Anyway, so we just did what we needed, but I guess this doesn't really look that much cleaner, right? So instead of that, we can actually take a lot of the code that we had in here and just put it there. So we need that. We can put it here. We also need that. So well, probably also this. So let's just put it here. And then what we're gonna do is return data is pending, error, and fetch data. And yeah, I think that's it. So now it's gonna be kind of broken, but that's all right. So yeah, I don't really need computed. Sorry, watch here. I don't really need watch here, and I don't need this. I will need the import use fetch data from use fetch data. So let's call it here. So const, and what we need from here is data is pending error, and I think that's what we need. And what we need to pass is the URL and the delay, right? So let's do URL 300, and then we need to do something like this. Is it all correct? Oh, I hope so. Okay, cool. So with composable, yep, works perfect. I'm not that terrible after all. So that's like the what we how the composition API works. If you would like to see the renderless implementation, this is how it looks like. And yeah, I can probably share the repo later on the Discord channel. So this is how it would be used. And like that's the big problem, is that like error refresh, you only have access to it here. You can't really access it anywhere here, which is less than ideal, right? But some fancy things, because like people are looking at this like, oh my God, this is so terrible. That's like ugly. It's not even JavaScript, right? I mean, it's HTML, but it's not even JavaScript. So let's move to JavaScript, JS6, which is not JavaScript, by the way. But you can use that too. And I'm not going to write JS6 because it's so well, frustrating, especially if you don't use it. But I have it copied somewhere here, so I could do it with everything. But I figured like, hey, I'm going to act like a pro. So yeah, and you can use the use fetch data, and if instead of returning the object with the data or like everything that should be exposed to the template, you can just return a function that's going to be a JSX or a render function. You can use actual JavaScript and render functions, but yeah, you can use JSX for that. So for React fonts, it also works. Except, well, refresh doesn't work. Well, maybe it's not great after all. So bug. Cool. Why does it work? Refresh. Oh yeah, maybe. I don't know. How does it work? Maybe something like this? Maybe something like this? Oh. Nope. I don't know. This is frustrating. Maybe like this. Nope, definitely not. Well, I don't really know JSX. I just use it barely for like some higher order components, actually. So are there any Svelte fonts? I don't know how to say that. Well, so there is also a thing that you might not know within Vue, which is a special syntax. And it looks like this. So you do script and you do setup. And well, that's the magical thing. So after you do that, you can, well, let's make it work, right? So I just wipe that console. Here it is. Import, and let's import ref, import computed from Vue, and then let's do import use fetch data from data. And then what we're going to do is const breed. Why don't I just copy it from here? I don't know. Okay, well, let's just do that. So we have our stuff here. And then what we need actually is, well, I guess I don't think we need anything more, because this should work. Oh gosh, does it? Huh. Oh yeah, I think I just need to rename because it's dog data. So just dog data. And yeah. Oh yeah, it's pending, and I need to import the fetch method and call it refresh. Okay, Svelte fonts. Okay, it doesn't work either. Refresh, const. I think I just, oh yeah, fetch data. Obviously, that's why it wasn't working here. Well, let's do it here. Yeah, that's what happens when you, well, oh, works, perfect. So here, let's go back to this example. So even less code. There is some magic in here, but yeah, I hope, but I mean, if you use Svelte, you don't really care about magic, right? So yeah, here, enjoy. And I think that's it. Where is the presentation? Here is the presentation. I'm just going to do something like this, play in Windows, set on this track on the side here. So, well, thank you. This is where you can find me. There is a sponsor link if you want to sponsor. Very much appreciated. And yep, that's it for me. Thank you. Any questions? Do we have time for questions? I don't know.
Thank you, Damian, very much for this talk. I laughed my ass out.
That's good. That's my job.
Thanks a lot for that. I think Sweater fans were very happy when you mentioned that they don't use logic. Okay, well, we have a lot of questions. Most of them will be moved to the networking session to Discord. I hope you can join us, and
Sure.
Thanks for that you declared you're coming. So let's see one of them. Yeah, for example, Gone Drone. So you can extract parts of view functionality without a component. That's cool.
Is this a real question, though?
It's actually no, it's observation.
Yeah,
so
I know. That's true, and it's very useful. Like, it literally makes building any type of like I don't know, like stores or like validation libraries and all of that very easy, because well, you are not bound to a component. So if you want to build a global store like a Vuex clone, something completely new like Pina, it's like so much easier to do compared to Vue 2, where you had to create like hidden Vue component instances like with new Vue, and then hack around with the a bit clunky syntax, which was designed for Vue components, but not really for like plugins. So yeah, it's a big plus, and I think you can use it in other situations also. Like I think even on server side, if you wanted that, but well.
Okay, and then now a real question. So what is the difference between passing function and refs as first argument to watch?
So the first argument is like, what's the watch target? Like, what should we observe and react to, right? So if you pass a ref or an array of refs, like this is gonna be what you will be observing, right? Whereas if you pass a function, it's more about like in a computed property where you have and maybe yeah, that's not I mean, that's important, but like not right now. So you have a computer property, right? And computer properties, whenever they execute, they collect all of the maybe I haven't asked like whether this was big enough. So computer properties, when they execute, they collect all of the dependencies, right? So when this executes, within the context of this function execution, it collects breed as its dependency. So whenever breed changes, there is a subscription that like it lets the computer know like, hey, I'm changed, you're dirty, and like whenever something like asks your value, you have to recalculate. And this works exactly the same within a watcher. So if I were to do something like, hey, here's a function, and let's do like an if statement, if X, then return Y, or well, Y, and then I'll return Z, right? Depending on whether X is true or not, you would register always two dependencies, always X, and then either Y or Z. So technically, this is a bit more flexible because it allows you to have a watcher that conditionally depends on, well, the dependency list that was there when the watcher target function has been executed last time. So it's pretty useful if you want to like switch target and like you don't really want to watch that property anymore and you want to watch another one. Of course, the watch function returns on watch. So if you want to stop a watcher somewhere else, you can just do on watch. I mean, this wouldn't really make sense because it would just execute once, and if you remove that, it wouldn't execute any at all. So yeah, that's the main difference. So yeah, if you know specific properties that you want to watch, you can do like URL, and then you also want to watch the error, and yeah, that's how it would. That's what you can do, and it would makes it very easy to tell what we are watching.
Awesome. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Damian. Let's continue this discussion on Discord, and let me invite the last keynote speaker. Thank you very much. Last keynote speaker, Ryan Chenkie. Ryan, are you here? Can you hear me well?
Yes, I've got you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well, and I'm happy you're with us with this professional setup.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I got the lights and camera and mic going, so I'm ready to rock and roll here.
Okay, so let's rock and roll. You have 22 minutes. I'm not going to stop you anymore. So let's start, and let's see if the presentation looks well.
All right, let me know if you can see the slide here.
I can. All right, so
we're good to go?
Yes, let's go.
All right, cool. So yes, my name's Ryan, and the talk today is TypeScript Beyond the Basics. So a lot of JavaScript developers are probably hearing more and more about TypeScript if you're not using it already. A lot of people have switched over to TypeScript. I'm one of those people. I've sort of said that any new project that I'm going to do, it's going to be TypeScript only. And that's because I've really realized the benefits of TypeScript. You hear a lot of people talk about how it's a bit slow to get going with TypeScript. It takes more time to do things with TypeScript than you would otherwise be able to do with just JavaScript. But the benefits that you get downstream from when you start are just really beyond measure, I think. So I have become a TypeScript fan. I'm totally all in on TypeScript, and that's what I want to talk to you today about, and look at some of the beyond the basic stuff of TypeScript. So a little bit about me. I work at Prisma. I'm a developer advocate there. My Twitter is there at Ryan Chenkie on Twitter, and yeah, I work at Prisma. Do a lot of content, a lot of videos, a lot of talks about TypeScript, like I'm doing today, and about databases, because at Prisma we are all about databases and making it easier for developers to work with all sorts of databases. So right into it, TypeScript. What is it? What do you do with it? Why do you care? If you're not familiar with TypeScript, it solves problems kind of like this. You have a function here. This just takes two numbers. It's supposed to take two numbers and add them together. This is just regular JavaScript. And the problem with JavaScript is you could then go and call this add function and pass in a number and a string or something else, something that completely won't work with this function you've got set up. And the issue here is that you're going to get something that is not valid in your program. So JavaScript suffers from this problem where issues like this, passing arguments of types that you don't intend for your function, is very possible and not a good thing. So TypeScript comes into the picture like this. Very simply, we can say that the two arguments that are going to go to this add function, they are supposed to be numbers. We can type hint them with a colon and say num1 is supposed to be a number, num2 is supposed to be a number. And then when we go to call the function, we can anticipate that we're not going to be able to even run the program if we pass something that is not a number. So in this case, if we pass foo as a second argument, it's going to give us a compilation error, and we're not even going to be able to proceed. So TypeScript helps us in this situation because we solve a lot of problems for ourselves before our programs even run. And that means fewer errors, fewer bugs to track down in the future, which is just great. There is this thing with TypeScript I've been finding, though, and I put out this tweet the other day, which seems to resonate with people, that there's kind of two ways to write TypeScript, or at least it seems like that to me. It's either the first way is JavaScript with just a little pinch of salt, just a little bit of TypeScript, kind of like we've done here, right? Just type in the two arguments, the two parameters, and away we go. But the other way is to do something where you have no idea what you're looking at. And I have found that to be true myself when I look at TypeScript code that looks like this. I pulled this from a gist that my colleague sent me recently, and I'm talking to you today about TypeScript Beyond the Basics, but I couldn't really begin to tell you too much of what's going on here. There's just a lot going on. This is tricky to look at, a little bit tricky to reason about, but this gets into really advanced stuff that TypeScript can do. and gives you a lot of power to make your programs really type safe, really flexible as well. So this is a super advanced use case. I'm going to talk to you today about some more basic advanced, I guess you could say, use cases. And there are three features that I want to talk about in particular. The first is generics. So we'll talk about generics, what those are, how you use them. And then the second will be index type queries and lookup types. So there's this keyword called key of in TypeScript, and it allows us to do this kind of index type query sort of thing. And then we can couple that with lookup types. We'll see that in a little bit. And then the last thing will be template literal types, which sort of are in the same vein as template literals in JavaScript, and we'll see how those work as well. So without going too much more into slides, that's the last slide I've got. I will jump right into some code to give us a sense of how these things work. So generics. Generics help us to solve this kind of problem. Let's say we had a function, and we'll call it reflect. Reflect is just going to basically return whatever it is that we give to it. So let's say we have an arg, and let's say that we want it to be a number. We will return a number. So all we do is we say, let's return arg. Perfect. So reflect works, right? We can do reflect. We can pass in 1. That's all good. If we want to use reflect, though, on a string, for example, we aren't going to be able to use it as is, because we have said reflect always expects a number and it always returns a number. So it's okay in the number case, but in the case of a string, it is a no-go. So that's no good. What do we do here? We could say, well, let's give ourselves 2 functions. Let's have reflect number. So we'll have that as the first function. And then, you know what? Let's copy this over. Let's do reflect string. So this is going to be our second function. Instead of dealing with numbers, we are going to deal with strings. And we can say reflect string here. Oops. And we are good to go with foo. And like we would expect, if we tried to pass a number there, no good. Reflect string only expects strings. So this is okay, especially if we've got just like a couple, types we want to deal with. But if we want to get into some more complex types, and especially if we want to get into cases where we'd anticipate any given type to be used in these places for the arguments and for the return, it becomes difficult to follow this pattern. So instead of this, what we can do is we can give ourselves something that is more flexible. And to do that, we will use what are called generics. So generic looks like this. We will go beside the parentheses here to the left side of it, and we'll put in some brackets, and we'll give ourselves a parameter here. So a generics parameter. It's common to see this where you would have t as your parameter. You can call it whatever you want. You could call it type, you could call it foo, you can call it whatever. Common pattern is to use t, so we'll use t. And for the argument now, instead of saying it's a number or a string or anything, we'll say it is of type t. So this seems a little confusing. This seemed confusing to me initially. It's like, what is this t thing? Why is it applied in these different spots? Like, what is this? What does this all mean, right? So we'll see how this works. If we, we'll return arg. If we want to use this now for any given types, for example, if we reflect a number, what we can do is say in the generics argument spot, let's make sure that it's going to use a number. So reflect now expects a number in this case. And instead of, if we tried to pass in a string, no good. We are expecting it to be a number. This means that this single function now is much more flexible. So we can pass it a string in this case, and it's good there. Basically, anywhere that we would want to use this for really any type now, this is going to be good. So, for example, we could say pass in a promise, and I don't know, let's see if this will work. New promise, can we do that? If it'll return a promise for us? No, that's not going to work. I'm not sure what we would pass in to actually return ourselves a promise, but in any case, you can start to work with various types. One thing to note here about generics is, given the argument that we pass in, we can actually rely on TypeScript's ability to anticipate what we are sending in. So TypeScript is going to look at what we're sending in, and it's going to apply that type for us automatically. So we don't technically need to pass in here the type that we want to use. But it does become important to do this if we're taking in, say, some kind of input here from upstream, some kind of thing passed down to our function. To protect ourselves all the way through that chain, we should put in the actual type that we're anticipating with our generic. So that's what we'll do there. So there's generics. They get, much more complex. You can use multiple generics. You can start to put in multiple spaces here. You can have multiple generic parameters. We'll see a little bit about that as we go, but that's a really quick look at generics. I'd say give them a try. Try to make your code a little bit more flexible that way, and you'll do quite well rather than having to repeat the same argument functions rather over and over again. Okay, next thing we'll look at index, type query, and lookup types. So let's say we had a type, and we'll deal with animals right now. We'll have a type of animal. We'll have a name, that's going to be a string. We'll have maybe speed, that'll be a number. And let's have size, that'll be a number as well. So we've got this type animal, and now we can use this to strongly type maybe a new animal, right? So my animal equals name, cougar, maybe. And what we could do is say the speed. Going to be like 500. I don't know what this will mean, but speed is 500 and size 30. Whatever these numbers mean, I don't know. We're protected here because if we tried to do something else, we'll be told if we type in this, that is, as an animal, that this property here is no good. We cannot put that property on. It is not anticipated by the type that we've set up. So that's all good. We've got our animal, no problem there. And let's say that we wanted to now use maybe like one of these keys as a string somewhere. So if we wanted to do like animal prop, for example, we wanted to get one of these single props off of here. What we could do is we could say, well, our animal prop could either be name, or it could be speed, or it could be size, right? We could use one of these things to set as the value for this constant of animal prop. So we could set our value here as name, that's okay. But if we tried something that's not in here set as the possible types, then we get a type error. So good, that's fine. We can just, rely on setting our possible string types this way, no problem. But the problem comes in when we start to expand this type, right? So, if we tried to do something else, some other property here like breed, right? That could be a string. If we wanted to then, data there for now. If we wanted to pick up on this breed, we'd have to go in here and say, okay, well, we've got to add it here now. We've got to add breed as a possible, thing that we could set as our value here. So that's not so great. What we can do instead is use the input type query, index type query rather. And so for that, we can use key of. There's this keyword here called key of, and we could say key of animal. And what this is going to do is it's going to go over our animal type, and it's going to pick out the properties here and give us those as the possible things we can use. So for example, if we do control spacebar, that's a little trick if you're not familiar with it. In VS Code, you can do control spacebar, and you can pull up your list of autocomplete suggestions here. So now in that list, I have got the things that are available here on my animal type. So if I take off breed, for example, and I fix up my object there, it's going to be reflected right away. So key of, that's the index type query. You can use that to your advantage, and it's often coupled with this thing called the lookup type. And so lookup types are kind of like this. If we have this is just JavaScript. If we do this array 1, 2, 3 in our array, and then we did console.log array at 1. That's going to give us this value, the string value of 2, right? So that is how we access things in arrays, right? We do this index access kind of thing. We can do something similar to that in TypeScript, where we are going to have index access to types. And so where this comes into play, one spot that we can see this is if we use it in combination with a generic. So let's give ourselves this function called getProp. And the idea here is that we want to take in a certain type, and we'll do the generic thing right there where we call it T. And we take in the objects that we want to deal with, and then we are going to return, let's just return the object for now that goes in. So this is much like the reflect function that we did above. So we do get prop, and we pass in my animal that is going to, for now, just return that entire object. Let's say, though, that we wanted to have a specific key that we have as an argument here, and maybe we'll just type in that as string, and we can say, give us that object at the key. Let's return that so that we only have a single thing coming back. So the issue here is that TypeScript doesn't work in this fashion where we can type in something as a string and then say, give us the object of that string. The error that we get is like there's this implicit any thing happening because typestring can't be used to index type unknown. So there's this unknown type within TypeScript that comes into play in this scenario. And the fix for it is to use the index type query. For that, we can say, let's have another generic parameter here where K, we'll call it K, and we'll say it extends key of T. So this new parameter called K is going to go and it's going to pick up on whatever T is, and then we can apply K to our key here as our second argument. Now this function is happy. It's going to be able to return the object at that key that we pass in. And the beauty of it is instead of being able to pass anything in here, what we get instead is type safety in this second argument spot. So we can pass, let's see if we get it here, name, size, and speed. We're given the list of options that we can actually use here. So we have type safety kind of two ways within this function. So that is really cool. So yeah, that's kind of combining the index type query and lookup types together, and it can provide you a lot of benefits for sure. The last thing we'll go over, it will be the template literal types, and we'll sort of build on the stuff we were doing just a second ago. And in this scenario, let's maybe look at the case of applying access control to an application. So I have traditionally done a lot of work with authentication and identity. I used to work at Auth0, and I've got courses about security for React applications and that sort of thing. So I've dealt a lot with this kind of thing. And let's have a bit of a contrived example where we've got this access control type. And maybe what we'll have here will be like a list of resources that someone may or may not have access to, right? So posts, that can be a Boolean. So it's like true or false. Somebody's got access to it. Invoices, just a bunch of random stuff that you would have in an application. Messages, stuff like this. Pretty contrived for now, but that's okay. So you could, go and apply this access control type wherever you want, and you could then, use it in many different ways. But if you wanted to get the individual things, the individual resources that may be up for grabs, let's say, we could do that key of thing that we just saw. So let's have another type called accessible resources, and that's going to equal key of access control. Cool. So, if we wanted to prove this out, resources, maybe it's like an accessible resources array. And then we could say within here, we've got invoices, messages, and posts. Okay, so we've got all of the properties as like values that we can bring out into this array. So that's fine. So what we might want to do now, though, is we might want to deal with scopes. So like in OAuth2, we dealt with this a lot at Auth0, where you'd have like a scope where you'd have like read messages, something like that, or create invoices. These are like, if you've got familiarity with OAuth2, you've probably seen stuff like this. You get like the action and then the resource that you are looking to act on. So scopes are very common in that sense. If we wanted to start to pull out to create scopes as types here, to use these resources along with the various actions you might want to deal with, that would get a little bit cumbersome, right? We'd have to do like, you got your create posts. Let's say this is an array. So we put this in an array. Create posts, you've got read post, right? All the way down, like all of these methods. So one cool thing that we can do is we can help ourselves out by giving ourselves a type, and let's call it maybe access levels. And we can say access levels would be create, and it could also be read. We could have edit, and we could have delete, something like that. You might call yours something different, but something like this. And then we could have something where we would do a type of scope, and this is where the template literals come in. So if you're familiar with template literals in JavaScript, you can use the backticks, and then you can use $ with your curly braces, and you can put in like a variable there or whatever, something to be executed along with a string. So that's pretty powerful. And as of TypeScript like 4.1, I think it is, it's either 4.1 or 4.2, we have something similar where we can do something like this. We can give ourselves access level and then like a colon, and we'll do another one of these. Accessible resources can be this one. So then if we have a constant of scopes, like say, a constant of scopes that the user would have, that'll be a scope array. We can set ourselves up here and see all of the permutations sort of expanded out. So instead of us going and creating each of these individually, it's just taken these two types together, access levels and accessible resources, and it's expanded everything out for us, which is great because if we wanted to add another one here and we wanted to add a couple more types, like, I don't know, authors, which is like a string, whatever, and users, string, just dummy types for now, probably would be something different. It'll just automatically expand all of this out. So you've saved yourself a ton of work if you want to have a really strongly typed kind of environment to give yourself hints about what you have available. So that's the three things I wanted to talk about: generics, index type query and lookup types, and template literal types. All really powerful tools that you can use that are at your disposal now in TypeScript. And I'd say have a go at it. Try to use them to your advantage. And if you're not already using TypeScript, it's really exciting times with TypeScript. I think there's a lot of advantages to using it, and you should definitely check it out. So thanks very much. I'm here on Twitter at Ryan Chenkie, and say hi to me there. Ask any questions you got in the chat, or hit me up on Twitter, and yeah, I'll talk to you there.
Congratulations, Ryan. Excellent talk. I'm very happy that you move it to depth, so it resolves some of my questions I had earlier. So it's more resolving my questions than giving more. So I think that a lot of people have this impression too.
Awesome.
Yeah. So awesome that you're here, and I hope you can join us also on Discord now. We already have there from the group. So I will share now the link and show the closing presentation. So let's move to the networking, to Discord. It's an open chat. Everyone can join. So yeah, I will now send you an invitation here on both on Facebook and on YouTube. And yeah, so thanks a lot, Ryan, and see you soon there on Discord.
Awesome.
Okay, yeah, and I wanted to show you the last slides. So I'm coming back now to my slides, and I share it. Share the screen. Actually, Chrome tab. Okay. So thanks again to our sponsors. So 10 Clouds, Fresha, Packhub, PostClick, Prisma, and Sumo Logic, and Xfang. And guys, I have a great news also, because we already know the lineup for 14th April 2021, and there will be Adrian Bruś, Magdalena Stachyżyńska, Radek Zatoka, and Tomasz Stachewicz speaking. So again, a great lineup, and hope to see you again on second Wednesday of the month, so on 14th April. And now you're all invited to our Discord. So as I already published the slides, there is also a link to that, but actually I shared also the link independently. So you can currently go to Discord and talk to all of our speakers. So thank you very much and see you soon. Thanks a lot.